The hills surrounding Florence are a masterpiece of Renaissance beauty, woven with olive groves, sprawling vineyards, and quiet moonlit lovers' lanes. But beneath the canopy of those ancient trees, a profound, suffocating darkness took root, staining the Tuscan soil with a series of crimes so brutal they defied comprehension. For nearly 2 decades, the Monster of Florence hunted relentlessly in these shadows, leaving behind a trail of shattered glass, mutilated bodies, and a deeply terrified public. Amidst the blood and the panic, a singular, cold piece of evidence linked the carnage together. It was not a stray fingerprint, nor a reliable witness description, but a mechanical signature left behind in the dirt. At the center of this sprawling nightmare was a single firearm, a Beretta .22 caliber pistol. This weapon would become the undeniable red thread connecting 14 distinct murders, speaking a truth that the authorities repeatedly failed to hear. The terror that gripped Italy from 1968 to 1985 was punctuated by the rhythmic, mechanical strike of that specific firing pin. Yet, the initial homicide in 1968 was treated as a closed case, a tragic crime of passion pinned on a jealous husband. The shell casings from that night were swept into an evidence box and forgotten in a dusty bureaucratic archive, severing the narrative before the true serial killings even began. It took years of escalating violence for a sharp-eyed investigator to recognize the ballistic echo resonating through the Florence countryside. A fresh look at the Winchester ammunition recovered from later crime scenes revealed a unique microscopic flaw. The firing pin of the killer's weapon left a distinct, off-center indentation on the rim of every single shell casing. That tiny mechanical stutter proved the 1968 murders and the subsequent serial killings were the work of the exact same gun. This revelation should have been the turning point, the moment the net closed around the perpetrator. Instead, it triggered a catastrophic cross-jurisdictional forensic failure. Different police factions, magistrates, and regional carabinieri fiercely protected their own territories, refusing to share intelligence or coordinate their efforts. The ballistics evidence, clear and irrefutable, was buried under a mountain of bureaucratic ego, territorial disputes, and deeply flawed investigative protocols. While the authorities squabbled in their sterile offices, the killer operated with terrifying clinical precision. This was not a frenzied, disorganized attacker lashing out in the dark. The perpetrator was methodical, approaching the parked cars of young couples, disabling the vehicles, and executing the victims with calculated, rapid fire from the Beretta before moving on to the post-mortem mutilations. The weapon was merely a tool to facilitate a deeply rooted psychosexual compulsion. The sheer audacity of the attacks escalated with each passing summer, turning the once romantic lovers' lanes into active hunting grounds. Young couples stopped driving into the hills, terrified of the headlights cutting through the darkness. The phantom with the .22 caliber pistol seemed omnipotent, striking on moonless nights, navigating the dense brush with the familiarity of an apex predator perfectly adapted to his environment. Back at the crime scenes, the preservation of evidence was a tragic comedy of errors. First responders routinely trampled through the blood-soaked grass, destroying tire tracks and burying crucial footprints. Reporters and curious onlookers were often allowed to wander just feet from the bodies before the victims were even removed from the vehicles. In this chaotic environment, the pristine ballistics profile remained the only uncontaminated witness to the slaughter. Driven by public desperation and intense media scrutiny, investigators began arresting suspects based on flimsy, circumstantial connections. The infamous Sardinian Trail saw multiple men thrown behind bars, accused of passing the murder weapon among themselves like a macabre heirloom. Magistrates built elaborate legal theories, convincing themselves they had dismantled a local criminal syndicate responsible for the decades of bloodshed. But the Beretta .22 caliber pistol refused to be silenced by courtroom theatrics. While the prime suspects sat securely in prison cells, the distinct crack of the Winchester ammunition echoed once again through the Tuscan night. Another couple was found dead, surrounded by the exact same shell casings bearing that undeniable off-center firing pin indentation. The mechanical truth shattered the prosecution's fragile narrative entirely. Humiliated and desperate, the investigation mutated into something even more bizarre, pivoting away from the hard science of ballistics. Magistrates became consumed by a sensational theory involving a secretive satanic cult operating within the highest echelons of Florentine society. They hypothesized that the mutilations were part of an esoteric ritual commissioned by wealthy elites who paid local farmers to harvest body parts for black magic ceremonies. This descent into conspiracy theories was the ultimate betrayal of the forensic evidence. By chasing phantom cults and aristocratic masterminds, the authorities turned their backs on the singular clinical methodology of a lone serial offender. The red thread of the ballistics was ignored in favor of wiretaps, coerced confessions, and the sensational testimonies of unreliable informants seeking their 15 minutes of fame on national television. The killer, perhaps amused by the investigative circus, decided to insert himself directly into the narrative. In 1985, a chilling letter arrived on the desk of Silvia Della Monica, one of the lead prosecutors on the case. Inside the envelope, folded into a piece of paper, was a grim trophy taken directly from the final female victim. It was a brazen taunt, a demonstration of absolute control, proving the monster was still watching their every move. This brazen act sent a shockwave of terror through the entire nation, fundamentally altering the cultural fabric of a generation. The government was forced to acknowledge their utter failure to protect the citizens of Florence. The sprawling investigation had consumed billions of lives, ruined countless reputations, and spawned endless trials. Yet the phantom with the Beretta remained entirely out of reach, moving freely among the population. The eventual arrest and trial of a local farmer named Pietro Pacciani seemed to offer a desperate resolution. Prosecutors painted him as a violent, depraved monster, flanked by a group of accomplices dubbed the Picnic Companions. The courtroom became a theater of the absurd, relying on questionable witnesses and convoluted logic to tie these aging, disorganized men to a series of highly precise, methodical executions. Yet, in all the raids, interrogations, and exhaustive searches of Pacciani's properties, the most vital piece of the puzzle never materialized. The Beretta .22 caliber pistol was never found. A single, unfired Winchester cartridge matching the killer's specific batch was allegedly discovered in Pacciani's garden, but the circumstances of its recovery were so highly suspicious that it only fueled further allegations of police tampering and desperation. Without the weapon, the convictions remained hollow.
built on a foundation of sand. The ballistics evidence, which should have been the anchor of the prosecution, became a glaring reminder of everything the state had failed to achieve. The gun was the true monster, a mechanical beast that had passed through the shadows, leaving 14 bodies in its wake before vanishing into thin air without a trace. The psychological profile of the true perpetrator suggests a man who understood exactly how to manipulate the systemic weaknesses of the Italian justice system. He exploited the jurisdictional rivalries, capitalized on the chaotic crime scenes, and perhaps even encouraged the wild cult theories to mask his own deeply personal, solitary compulsion. He was a student of their failures, adapting his methods to ensure his own survival. Today, the case files of the Monster of Florence sit in vast, silent archives, a labyrinth of contradictory testimonies, botched forensics, and fractured timelines. The official narrative remains a tangled mess of partial convictions and lingering doubts. The true identity of the man who stalked the lovers' lanes is a ghost story whispered in the Tuscan hills, a phantom defined only by the distinct signature of his ammunition. The legacy of this investigation is a chilling testament to the dangers of ignoring the red thread of hard evidence. When egos, rivalries, and sensationalism overshadow the cold, undeniable facts of ballistics, the truth is easily lost in the dark. The Beretta .22 caliber pistol remains out there somewhere, rusting in a hidden grave or locked away in a secret drawer, holding the final unspoken answers to one of the most terrifying mysteries in modern history.